Well, good morning. It is so good to have all of you here. Great to have those of you who are joining us online and those in the chapel service to all be a part of it this morning. And so our theme, Better Together. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about the why behind that and maybe a little bit more depth to what we mean by that and just start pointing a little forward into this next ministry season. And thinking about this theme, Better Together, one of the things that struck me was an experience I had going back like 6-7 years ago when my first child, Chandler, entered college. Because, you know, when kids go off to college, it is so nice. They're on their own and they just never need you again, right? And you just let them go. Yeah. Isn't that how that works? Yeah. So I still remember Chandler going off to college, and it's like, wow, he's off to college. And we, Angie and I were very intentional about, just as we've raised them, trying to help them become better decision makers and help them to step out and be independent. And I was like, okay, we've done our job, and he's off, right? And then, like as a parent, as a dad, I realized, man, he is going through some significant decisions and things. And if you have a kid that is in college or has been through college, you know what I'm talking about. And there's a moment where you're just like, wow, I wish I could be there right now, not to make the decision for him, but just to be with him as a sounding board, because the decision he's making about his career and some of the differences and what could happen, I'm going through this, this really matters. And I wish I was there. And Chandler and I would text or talk on the phone, and there were moments where he'd go through things where he's trying to navigate kind of new levels with the friend groups or people that he's close to, and you're just realizing this is this time of life in young adulthood where there are all of these really important decisions and things, and while I just could not be more proud of him in how he is adulting and how he was doing that at that time, I still felt this thing that like my job as a dad still isn't over yet, and I wish I could be with him, but I couldn't. Like, I was down here. Every once in a while I could, go up there and see him, but I felt that. And I wonder, has there ever been a moment where there's someone in your life, someone that you really care about, and you see that they're navigating some part of their life that really matters? Maybe it's friends, and they're walking through something in their marriage. Maybe it's positive, maybe it's a deep struggle, and you wish you could be there, just to be a sounding board, just to be a part of it or whatever, and you can't, and you feel the gravity of what they're navigating, and you just, it matters so much, and you can't be there at that moment. Maybe you're a student, and you're at that point where okay, now it's I got to learn how to drive, that whole thing's coming up, or maybe it's at that point where it's okay, this is that first really close special relationship, and trying to navigate that, or future career, or what college to go to. There are these things in our lives that matter. And if you've ever had someone in your life going through that and you couldn't be there, then you can relate to Paul. And Paul is a guy who wrote a big chunk of the New Testament. And the reason I think of this is because there's a passage that I want to look at here this morning out of a letter that Paul wrote, and to think about just what's going on with Paul when he writes this letter. And one of the things you have to know is Paul traveled a lot. So early on in his ministry, he traveled to all of these different cities, and he would bring together kind of these little groups of people and talk about the gospel and talk about what it meant to follow Christ. And these are people that either never heard this before or knew very little about it. He goes to places like Cyprus and Philippi and Thessalonica, Athens, Corinth, Colossae, Laodicea, and a dozen other cities I can't think of right now. And he goes to all of these places, and behind him, oftentimes, these churches would start. Sometimes he was directly involved in starting the church. Sometimes the church would get going after that. And I want you to think about this for a moment. So he's traveling, and maybe he's over in Athens, and he's working with this group of people. And then he hears about what another church, just getting its foothold in the world, and it's trying to figure things out. And these churches went through things they had to figure out who the leaders were going to be of this church. Like we read in the New Testament, and we know there were times when they struggled to find the right leaders, and what would they do? Some of these churches were walking through this blend of Jewish people and Greeks, and there was no organization in the first century that just mixed those two groups of people and their cultures and religion and background together. And the church is doing that. And imagine some little church trying to figure this out for the very first time, right? That's not an easy thing to do. These churches went through theological issues that they were trying to navigate. Some of them were in the very beginnings of persecution, and like what do you do there? How do you lead a church that is where persecution is being ramped up? And you can just picture Paul, and he's like, okay, I'm over in Athens, and I need to give Corinth some attention, and I'm over there in Thessalonica, and just like, he can't be there the way he would want to be there. And while all of this is going on, right, the world that the church is trying to get its foothold in and begin moving the gospel forward in, like this is a world that had very little care for human beings, right? The world systems and powers. Like we're talking about in the first century, orphans and widows became destitute. Oftentimes to become a widow was a death sentence. In fact, one of the things that fueled prostitution in the first century, and many other times in the ancient world, is that there would be women that would become widowed at a point before, if they had kids, their kids weren't old enough to work or help bring in income. And like prostitution would be the only means by which they could even stay alive, right? This is the world they were in. There was a practice in the first century known as the practice of exposure. That was fairly common in a number of cities throughout the Mediterranean area, where if there was an infant or a small child that was unwanted, you could just leave that child outside. Like there'd be areas outside some of the cities. A few of the cities may have had some sections inside the city where it was legal to just abandon that child to just the outdoors where it would die. And because you weren't technically taking its life, right? You were allowed to just leave that child exposed to the outdoors where it would die, or oftentimes slave traders would come and take these kids because they would raise them as slaves in this. This was the world. Rome didn't care. Most of the religious leaders that had power or influence did very little. They didn't care. Right? The small countries and nations under the Roman Empire, they didn't care much. Like this was the world in there. Can you picture Paul saying, man, this matters. I want to move the gospel forward. I want to make a difference. I wish I could be there for these little churches that are just in the very, like they're going from adolescence into adulthood, and they still need some help to navigate some of these issues. But he can't be there for all of it. And I think about this because he writes these words to a church in the city of Colossae, who is in the middle of this blending of Jewish people and Greek people. And how do you navigate this? And he can't be there the way he wants. And so if you have your Bibles, turn to the letter of Colossians in the New Testament. There's a part I want to read, the end of the first chapter and the beginning of the second chapter, because he lays out two things. He lays out a purpose that we'll look at briefly here, but then he lays out a goal. And it is this goal that he lays out that I think speaks to you and I and to our church and what is before us, and why we want to live out of this theme better together. So look with me in Colossians chapter 1 and look at verse 27. It says this, to them, God has chosen to make known among the Gentiles the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. This is the one we proclaim, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone fully mature in Christ. So like he has this purpose that he's laying out for this church. And this purpose is this, I want you to be a part of making the mystery of Christ known. making it known to Jews and Gentiles and people in your city and your families, right? And that as this mystery is made known, that these people would become followers of Christ, that they would find salvation in him, but then they would grow up to become mature followers of him. That's all. Just do that and you're great, right? That's their purpose. But again, as they're seeking to live out this purpose that matters, they're in the middle of trying to figure out how do we blend Jews and Greeks, and how do we work out these theological issues, and what happens when we're persecuted, and how do we do this? And of course, I just feel Paul in this moment wishing he could be there. Just sit down with him and go, okay, let me help you out. Let's talk this out. Ask your questions. And just, right? Not that he wants to decide everything for them, but I bet he wishes he could be there just to help them mature themselves into this important role, because the world needed the church in the first century, right? That was a world that needed the hope of the gospel. It is a world that needed the mystery of Christ to become known. But you know what else, friends? We're a church in the year 2021. And I think that what we are doing still matters today as well. Every bit as it did in the first century. But how do we navigate it? How do we advance this beautiful purpose of making the mystery of Christ known in our world? And this is what Paul says next to this church in Colossae, that I think are words that we can apply for us, that become really important for us. So he lays out this purpose, right? To make the mystery of Christ known. But then he gives them this goal. And I want you to look at this. But as we look at this goal, I want you to hear his words leading up to, and this is your goal. Because what you will see, what you will hear, is the depth and the care that he has for this. This goal is what he is dedicating all of his energy and his effort towards, because he knows if they achieve this goal, they will have potency and success in the purpose that they have as a church. And I don't want us to miss this. This goal is important. But look at how he unfolds this. Look at verse 28. He says this: to this end, I strenuously contend with all the energy Christ so powerfully works in me, right? Just like everything, all the energy Jesus given me, I contend for this. I work towards this. Look at chapter 2. And when Paul writes this letter, he doesn't put chapters in this. And so look at how he flows into chapter 2. Look at verse 1. I want you to know how hard I am contending for you and for those at Laodicea, which was a city right near Colossae, and for all who I've not met personally, right? And he's like, there's this, I contend, I work for this. This is the goal. Here's the goal. Look at verse 2. My goal is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love. Don't miss that. That's his goal. He will struggle, he will contend. It's just like nothing will keep me from trying to help you become encouraged in heart and united in love. Because those two things is what will help them become the church that will see that purpose of the mystery of Christ revealed become a reality. When we talk about what it means to be better together, this is at the heart of it. What Paul says, what Paul struggles for, what Paul desires, that they would become a community that is encouraged in heart, united in love. That is better together, friends. That's what we're talking about. So let me I just want to take the rest of my time and unpack these two things for us. So I think let's start with encouraged in heart. And I love what he does here. He's drawing on something for the Greek audience in Colossae here. The Greek word is parakaleo. And interestingly enough, what he doesn't do is he doesn't take, it's not two words. It's not the word like for encouragement or heart. He takes this other word that actually became somewhat of a famous word that was filled with a lot of meaning for his Greek audience in this. In the 5th century, there was a Greek historian by the name of Xenophon that made this word somewhat famous out of a story that he recorded about this small regiment of Greek soldiers that actually traveled over to Persia to fight a battle in an effort to blunt the Persians from making their way back around over to Greece. And what happens is this small regiment gets over there, they have some initial success, but now after a while, they get worn out. They're thousands of miles from home. They start to get discouraged. They begin, Xenophon, he records that it's like they lose heart. They become disenchanted with what they're doing. They miss, Greece, and they're tired, they're hungry, they're outnumbered, right? Not a good situation. And then he describes this story as one of their generals, rallies them. And what he does is he pulls them together that they come to see and notice that what they have each other. They may be thousands of miles from home, but they have each other. And they may be hungry, but they have a cause. They have a purpose that matters. And it's like it becomes this kind of rally call. And he uses this word, encouraged in heart. And to really understand what this is like, it's a little bit like, ever gone to some sort of sports game, I don't know, maybe you showed up in an arena someplace. Maybe it was for a professional team or maybe a college team or even like you go to a high school football game, and the crowd's like milling around or whatever. And then it's like there's a moment where they start blasting over the speakers, Queens, we will rock you, right? And all of a sudden it's just like, oh, you hear that, right? We will. Yeah, right? And all of a sudden you start singing that song, blood on your face, and you're just like, yeah, we're gonna eat you guys for lunch, right? It's just like, and you just start, and you're looking around and everyone's, like, and you start, that's what this word is talking about. It's looking around like, yeah, we may be hungry, but we're gonna eat you. Yeah, we may be outnumbered, but it's, we've got spirit. And Xenophon, he records that and I love the words he uses. And I wonder if Paul did this on purpose, but he uses these words. He said, they were reborn with courage, right? This leader, and they just looking around and it's just like, hey, we've got each other. And they become reborn in courage. And I love this. It says, Xenophon says, and they were fit for heroic acts, right? They were ready to just take on the world. Now, but it's not like suddenly they weren't hungry anymore. It's not like they suddenly had more men. It's not like they were closer to home. They were just encouraged in heart. And it made all the difference in the world. And they were encouraged in heart because they saw that they were with one another. That's what they had. For all that they didn't have in that moment, they had each other in this. And what Paul is saying is, man, I can't be there. But in my absence, you need to be for one another what I would be if I could be there. Be that to one another. Be present with one another. And that's the application for you and for me in this, friends, for us as a church. In this next season, to fulfill our purpose, to expand the gospel, to reach, right, the world around us and the community right around us, it begins with us being encouraged in heart to be present. And that's my challenge, that we would be present with one another. And that begins with just like when you worship together, when you're in this room, and even if you can't be in this room, if you're watching it online, be aware of your brothers and sisters in Christ and just listen to the words that they sing and be encouraged that you are with this other group of people that are with you in this endeavor and with you in this community. And let that begin to encourage you in this, because it becomes important. It's interesting, I love the Olympics, right? And it feels a little bit like this year is a little different than past Olympics, doesn't it? Like just catching the news here or there, or even watching some of the games at moments, it's like all the side dialogue and everything it's like so much of it is not about the games, right? And now that's my experience with it. And I could be wrong. But it feels a little bit like this time around, there's like there's this lack of being encouraged in heart. And you feel it, they're those athletes over there. It's like they're needing this, like they're needing moments where they can turn and say, like we're together in this. We're a team. We're like, you feel that. And churches are no different. And Paul knows this. And so he says, I strive, I contend. I want you to be with one another. I want you to be present with one another. And that means, friends, things like when you show up, being present, but being present means engaging with one another. Ask how one another are doing. Find out. Make this place one of our values about being welcoming and open and caring about people, that no matter what you faced yesterday or this morning, that when you come into this place, we want you to feel welcome and accepted. We want this to be a good experience for you. And you know what? We have a team, we have a ministry that seeks to do that, but we need more than just a ministry that does that. We need all of us to do that. We need to be that to each other. And so when you come in, be that, seek that out. Pray for one another. You know, it's interesting, it has been a while since I had a prayer list, like a regular prayer list where I put down names and what I was gonna pray for someone. And it's like in the last couple of months, it's just been hard to hold all those prayer requests in my head. And I just went back to, I was just I'm gonna forget some of this stuff. And just recently felt the need to and actually do it on my phone now, like a whole new world, right? It's not on a piece of paper, I do it on my phone. And it's just because I wanna be with, I wanna be praying for somebody, and I'll be in a conversation with someone, and it's like, I wanna be with you in this, and I can be with you in this in prayer. And when I see you again, I wanna ask about it, because I care. And maybe for some of you, it's keep a prayer list. It's asking. You know, being with is also knowing how to be present, and not just present physically, but being present emotionally and mentally. We live in a world, right? The phone that I'm writing all those prayer requests on, it's amazing how in today's world we can hide behind those phones, right? A little bit of tension, it's just like, or conflict or something that bores us or whatever. And it's like, and we can hide behind our phones, we can hide behind our laptops, and here's what I would challenge you, right? Make sure you don't accidentally be physically present, but emotionally not present, because we need each other. We need to be able to look in each other's eyes, and we need to be able to talk and connect and be with one another in all of this. So be present with one another. Now, the other thing that he talks about in this that I think is important, and that is united in love. So there's this thing about being present, noticing that what we have with each other. But there's this part about being united in love, and this gets to doing, right? Because the New Testament always talks about love. Love, it always goes beyond just affection. It always goes beyond just a feeling. Love is an action. It activates behavior in us. And so to be united in love means that we actually behave. We actually activate a way to do things and to be united in this. To be united in loving one another and loving those that are outside of our church, and loving those in our community, and loving those at a global level. And what that means in a real practical way is to participate with, right? We need to be present, but we also need to participate with. To participate with one another in this. Right? It's a good thing to know and feel that gosh, I belong to this community. But we also need to help this community move forward. It needs who you are. I think about the early church, right? In this crazy world that it was in. You know, one of the things that the early church did, it was one of the first organizations in the world that actually organized itself to take care of widows and orphans. The early church didn't just let people fall through the cracks. Like they got organized with it. And it's one thing for an individual, right? And the world has always had a history of people, of individuals that would say, gosh, I see a widow, I see an orphan, I'm gonna do something about that. I see someone hurting, and you know what? That's good. That's good, right? I brought a jar of peanut butter today, right? That's good, right? That's good, right? But we're better together. When we organize together, right? It's not just one jar of peanut butter that goes to a family in need. It becomes stacks and stacks and stacks of peanut butter. In the first century, right, it wasn't just a few widows or orphans that were taken care of. Like that early church, like they kept organizing and like they did their best to not let any of them fall through the cracks in this. The early church was one of the first organizations to actually go to those places where infants were abandoned and rescue them and literally adopt them into their own families. That was the church. They weren't just present with each other, they were united in love, and they participated in a way with each other to advance the gospel in the most tangible of ways, right? Like that's, in fact, when you look in the New Testament and there's these moments where Paul will do this, he'll talk about you have been adopted into God's family. Part of what he's drawing on is he's like saying, so you know how God's love has motivated you to go and rescue one of those infants and not raise it as a slave, but actually adopt it in your family and treat it like one of your own? That's what God has done with you, see? And he says this because the church came together and they united in love. And for us, that's the same thing. And that means participating together. In fact, next Sunday, we're gonna roll out what we're doing all over this church as a church, ways that you can participate in different ministries around here. And I wanna encourage you, find a way to tangibly live out what we are and what we're trying to do as a church. So participate in things like drives, things that we do church-wide. Participate in those in this next season. Participate in a ministry. And you know what we need? We need all of the diversity that comes with you all as a church, because that is a good thing. And again, this starts with being encouraged in heart. You know what happens when you're encouraged in heart? All the problems don't just go away, right? All of the tension between the Greeks and the Jews and the church in Colossae, it's not like they just went away, but it's like they begin to lessen, right? Start stomping your foot to that song, right? And you're just like, yeah, it's just right. And it's just like the differences start to go away and you begin to see who we are as an identity, who we are in Christ. And then you begin to advance that. You put your energy, your effort, your resources, your mind, your heart toward it. And all of a sudden, right? It's not just the good part of what a few people are doing here and there. Together, we do something that can be extraordinary. I think about Chandler that first year he was in college. In moments where I was just like, oh man, I wish I could talk to him about that more. You know, he texts me with something and it's just like, and I'm trying to text as fast as I can and I am not a fast texter. I'm like, you know, I wanna sit down right in front of you. I wanna see your face. I wanna know how you're doing. I wanna pull in your friends. I wanna know like this, you know, but I rarely could. But a young man who's now become one of my son's closest friends, his family lives in the town that they go to college in. And his dad, early on in Chandler's freshman year, started pulling this young group of guys together, like 4 or 5 of them, and he'd just take them out to breakfast. And one time Chandler's talking to me and he goes, oh yeah, and Chris said this. And I thought, that's a great question. That's what I want you wrestling with as you're navigating this next thing. And then I realized, who's Chris? You know? Oh, that's Noah's dad. And I was just like, oh, and all of a sudden, what I couldn't be there for, there was someone else, it was another dad who stepped in and participated, stepped in and pulled them together and has continued to do that and my son now is in the graduate program. I mean, he's got his degree, moving on, and has stayed with doing that. And I think that's what Paul is saying. There's a moment where Paul's saying, man, I can't be there. I'm over in this city and I can't be there. But you know what? If you all are encouraged in heart and you're united in love, if you participate, if you be what I would want to be if I could be there, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna advance the gospel in beautiful ways. God is gonna do amazing things, see? And that's why when I read these words, what I wanna say is we are better together. And better together means that we encourage one another in heart, right? We will be, and we can just be that by just being present, just caring. But we will participate together. We don't carry this mission forward by ourselves. We carry it forward together, and we need one another, right? We need single people and married people and the perspectives that they bring and the things that they have. We need students and we need seniors because there is wisdom and there is points of view that come from those things, and we need that. We need men and we need women. We need there's just something amazing about a church that comes together and says, we are now uniting in love to advance the beauty of how Christ can change a world that needs him just as much now as it did 2,000 years ago. And let me end with this thought. I'm gonna take the application one step further with this idea of participate, and I'm gonna say it to a more select group of you. Because there is a group, right? A group this size, I know this to be true. In a group this size, there is a significant portion of you that have gifts of leadership. You either have gifts of leadership that were taught or developed in you. Some of you have a natural inkling to leadership. It's a part of how God wired you, a combination of those things. And what I want to say is, participate as a leader. Step into these moments. Even if you're not asked, if you see a moment that will move this church to be more deeply encouraged in heart, step into that moment and use your gifts. And I don't care if you're young or old, I don't care your background, I care if God has blessed you with gifts of leadership, lead and step into that. When you see an opportunity, step into that opportunity. Be a part of moving something forward so that the potential of what God has put into this whole body of believers becomes more and more potent because we are better together, friends. Here this past Friday, I got to do something that was really special. Chandler, most of that friend group that he has, almost all of them, ended up down here in Tucson over the summer, taking summer school classes at U of A. And so they were kind of here. And this past Friday, I gathered them all up and I took them out to lunch. And I thought, Chris is, he's up in Flag and he can't be here, right? But I can. This is my moment. I see it. I'm gonna step into this. This is my moment to just carry this on and just have this conversation with these amazing young men, and kind of funny and goofy at times. And I actually had a great time hanging out with them, right? But also it was just helping to draw and pull out some of the amazing things that are already in them and help them encourage one another. And it's just like, gosh, I can do this too. This is my chance. Leaders, when God puts those opportunities in front of you, step into them. And let's watch what God does with all of us in this next season of ministry as we seek to be better together, because we will. And we will live out Paul's advice and heart and desire in this next year. I'm going to close this in prayer, but right after I do, Andy and Vanessa are going to come out because they've got just a few last-minute instructions in this. So why don't you stand, and I will pray, but I'll let Andy and Vanessa close this out. Let me pray. Father, I lift up this community of believers, and I pray that you would empower them. I pray that you would just unite them in powerful ways. I pray that you'd knit their hearts together. I pray that you would fuse a sense of love from you to them that just excites them, that gets translated into loving others and loving this world, because I know that we are truly better together, Father. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen.